Hi, I'm Krista Arthur, and welcome to the Consilian Report. We continue with our journey on navigating what we think may be coming next with regards to COVID and work from home. And today we're interviewing Natalie Sherrod of Kavanagh and Associates. Natalie is talking about some of the unique challenges with regards to risk management with our remote workers, and then also hidden gotchas that you should look for when you're thinking about a cybersecurity policy, which I hope you're thinking about having a cybersecurity policy. It's very, very important. So Natalie is very knowledgeable, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, how are you, Krista?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good.
Great. I'm so glad that you can join me today to talk about risk. We're going to talk about risk. We're going to talk about COVID-19, remote workers, and then we're also going to be talking about the hidden gotchas with cybersecurity insurance policies. So I'm so thrilled that you could be here. So before we get started, tell me what makes Kavanagh, I'm saying it properly, right? Kavanagh and Associates different than the other insurance brokers.
Yeah, well, first, thank you so much for having me on. I love the opportunity to just share information. I just think that's so important there's so much going around right now, especially with COVID. So anything I can do to help. So thank you for having me. In terms of Kavanagh, so we're a full service insurance brokerage. We handle business lines, which is what I do, property, casualty, cyber insurance, professional liability. We have benefits, personal lines, as well as a surety department. And our approach is really all encompassing. So our goal is to not sell insurance to a company. It's really to understand their business, help them understand their exposures, talk to them about how to mitigate those exposures. Insurance is really the last piece of that equation. Right. There is a lot of ways to mitigate your risk without insurance, and that's fine and great. And so we like to talk to our clients through that. So we have a pretty thorough assessment that we go through with our clients. And I think a lot of people may do that on the front end, but what's different with us is we continue this process throughout the year. We engage with our own risk control team to touch back on what was discussed during that assessment. And then we go through the same assessment again each year. Because businesses change, and what might have been the right program or coverages for you one year could be even completely different the next. Hopefully not. Hopefully you're, but you never know. So our engagement with our clients and really wanting to help them protect and grow their business is something I think that's a bit different about us, and I really like it.
Yeah, you evolve with them, it sounds like, and partner with them, which is what we love at Consilian. We love the partnership. We just don't want to be a vendor. We want to be a partner with them in the growth of their business. So we are of like mind, Natalie.
Yes, good. And that's important. And you want clients that want other partners like that, because when we talk about cyber, your group is critical to this. They could have the coverage in place, but it really starts with what you're doing. And those are the conversations that we have. So I love this collaboration.
Right. So how has the remote work situation, how has that affected some of your customers on the risk side?
So the risk is exponentially larger now. You're talking about, there are plenty of companies that have been working remote for some time, so maybe it didn't change for them. But I think not only do you have the exposure now of everyone working from home, but with how quickly that came about. A lot of companies didn't have time to ensure that the security was in place for that. And so you have now employees working off of their own networks. They might even be working off of their own computers. Right. And so from a cyber risk standpoint, that opens up a lot of opportunities for bad actors to get in. And unfortunately, this is cyber crime is a huge industry. And so people realize that there's an opportunity. Actually just before our call, I got an email, not from a client, but from another business partner of mine, not at our firm, but that someone else we collaborate with, who said, I had malware on my computer. Please don't open any links. They're going to be seeing that. And then you also, from a policy standpoint, which we'll look at, talk a little bit more later, but You need to make sure that there's no warranties within your policy that are now being breached because of the new system and environment. You need to make sure that what's covered is what you thought is covered.
So let's just jump right into the cyber liability insurance, because we always recommend whenever we do an assessment for a customer, a network and security assessment, we always ask them what kind of, or if they have coverage, because it's it's part of the whole business continuity planning for them. So
yeah, absolutely.
Talk about some of the hidden gotchas with the cyber liability. I think you and I talked before about how it's new and each one is different. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So, I mean, in terms of insurance, it's new. I mean, cyber policies have been around for just probably about 15 years. But when you look at other forms, the general liability form, the property form that have been around for, over 100 years, there's standard forms that most companies follow. And so one policy to the next can be very similar outside of exclusion forms that are put on there, but it's a bit easier to understand, what to expect within a form or what you should be looking for. With cyber, there's no standard form that companies are using. So every insuring agreement between each policy is different. There are certain coverages that tend to be more standard. So when you talk about cyber and privacy liability, the intent for that is to protect a business if they are brought into a lawsuit due to their private information getting out from their server of their clients or their employees. That is really where cyber started. But since then, it's evolved quite a bit. And so now there's coverages as well for the cost to investigate forensics for what happened, whose data was taken. If there is ransomware or extortion, there's costs for that can be covered. You talk about continuity, business interruption, huge consideration for clients. And then there's the crime side of things. So if somebody is able to get into your network and make a fraudulent transfer or trick your employee to making a transfer, all those coverages are different, and not all policies have those, especially from a crime standpoint. Those typically are sublimited, and you really need to look at those to make sure that you have what you need.
Well, you really need someone to guide you through and thinking through all the possibilities or the risks to your particular business, right? You need someone to really help you sit down and do that.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's important, is just really understanding what the intent of this policy is for you. Like I said, with general liability, general liability covers you if you cause any bodily injury or property damage to another person or property. That's what liability is for. There's two other insuring agreements in there, but that's the main portion. So it's not hard to think about. With cyber, you have to think about, are you concerned about the crime aspect? Are you concerned about the business interruption? Are you concerned about the privacy liability? What is it that you're trying to cover to make sure that your cyber policy has that? Because each of these insuring agreements are different. So it's having that discussion about, what do you want this coverage to do? I think a lot of people think that the cyber crime aspect is standard.
Right.
And that unfortunately can be a rude awakening for a client when they realize that it's not. And we're even seeing the next level of somebody, getting into your network, sending a fraudulent invoice to your client's client. And then the client's client is at a loss, and who pays for that? And so those are just the conversations that you need to have to understand. You might not want to cover it. It's going to be more expensive to get those higher crime limits, but you need to know what you have.
It's why I think it's so important that we have discussions like this to help businesses really think through on the cyber side what they might need. and to educate themselves, because even with a company that is outsourcing their IT, which is a great thing to do, they may think that they have certain strategies in place to protect them, and they don't. They're just assuming that their IT company is taking care of everything, and they're not really having a conversation. And the reality is that maybe they don't have, virtualized backup. So if something happens to the company, it can't come right back up. So there's lots of things for them to consider. So I think it's important that they have someone like you, right, to walk them through, at least on the cyber liability side, what that might look like. So
yeah,
the more complex, the more expensive it gets with the policies.
I would say it's actually more about the risk of the client. So the client that has more, is holding more personal data. So healthcare or credit card processing companies, those are going to be more expensive because there is more risk there. Those that are handling other funds, if that's what you're trying to cover. It can get more expensive when you start to add higher limits on the crime. But not, I mean, it's absolutely worth exploring. It's not anything that's going to throw it, especially for the return you get on that investment. Cyber is still very affordable for the coverage that is being offered. And I see that. I have not seen the increases yet. I see more claims coming in. In the data that I'm reading
That's interesting.
on cyber, there's especially in smaller businesses that, because I said that right now the payment is really based on the company itself. So you might have a small, nonprofit or small accounting firm, that obviously they're going to have some private information, but not a Google, not a Target. And if they get hit with a $500,000 extortion, a ransomware, the policies, that is a pretty typical coverage in a policy. So that's gonna jump in on that. So I could see in premiums going up at some point in the next few years, but for right now, it's still very affordable for the coverage you're getting, and comes with a lot of benefits outside of just the coverage as well, which we can talk about in a minute.
So you said that you're seeing more claims coming through just since the COVID, or just since last year, or?
I mean, I have seen a couple instances just in some articles that I've read with regards to COVID about there being opportunity because of the working from home, and they have seen a few more, but I think we're too soon to tell on that.
Okay.
But just in general, so the shift in smaller companies buying cyber, we've started to see that over the last 3 years. So now we have, which is great, because I think it's now people are realizing it's a necessary coverage. But because of that, and those premiums were very affordable, we're seeing these larger claims like ransomware, that it's just causing it to be tougher for there to be any sort of underwriting profit there.
Okay. And we talked in the past offline about manufacturers and seeing a rise in ransomware with manufacturers as well. Yeah.
And these bad actors are smart. They're looking for certain types of industries. So I know we had talked about, think about healthcare attorneys that have all that private information. So that's what they're going to go after if they're trying to extract data. But from a manufacturing standpoint, with the way that manufacturing has moved, where there's so many components to their manufacturing process that are all they're necessary. The servers is running all of that. These bad actors understand that if they can have a ransomware attack to say, your system is down. You can't run your line. You can't run your new robotic equipment. They realize that manufacturers that need to get back up and running are more likely to pay those. So we've seen more ransomware claims from a manufacturing standpoint.
That's a good point. We have a customer that they run pretty much 24/7. they're a food manufacturer, and so they have multiple shifts and they run through the evening. So whenever we have to do updates, it has to be at, between 3 and 4 a.m. So 100%, that cost of downtime for manufacturers would be exorbitant. And I read an article a while ago talking about that the backlog that they get as a result of being down, the back orders, creates these long tail costs. So not only do they have to pay the ransomware and they're down, they're going to be paying for that over the course of the next 2 years. That's what the studies show. So that's really important for manufacturers to be aware of.
Yeah, I just read an article just last week about a steel manufacturer that had to furlough their employees because they had a ransomware attack, and they weren't able to get, as you kind of mentioned before, they weren't able to get back to where they were prior to the attack. So then it's not just getting back up and running, but it's getting your systems back up to where they were previously. And that takes a lot of time and money. If you don't have those backups running properly, you sometimes have to rebuild that. And that is built into some of the coverage that's in these policies. But they furloughed their employees because they didn't expect them to be back in the next couple of weeks.
So they can work into the policy again that extended downtime. So if they have an incident and they're down maybe for 3 days or something, hopefully not, but if they're down for that long, that cyber liability will cover that if it's written.
Yep. So there's a business interruption insuring agreement. Typically there is going to be a waiting period on that between 24 and 48 hours, which is that's standard with a business interruption policy. And you can always try to get that negotiated out for a little bit higher cost. And then some policies also have third-party business interruption. So meaning if their supplier is down because of a cyber incident, they might be able to recoup some of that cost as well. So it's good to have these conversations, and even within contractual agreements, that's something we talk about with our clients a lot too, with your upstream and downstream parties. You want to make sure that, you're set, but also those who you're relying on are set.
Right. Is there anything else we need to be thinking about with regards to cyber liability?
From a cyber standpoint, I just think it's there's a couple nice enhancements to look for when you're looking at a coverage. So once you've determined the coverage that you need, that's first and foremost, and then you can get the policy form that makes sense for you. Also look into some of the enhancements that are in there. So some require you to use the insurance company's determined panel of vendors, which these typically these vendors are great vendors. So for most clients, it's great because they have access to this relationship that the insurance company has. But others might have a great relationship with their own vendor, like Consilian, and so they want to be able to utilize them for forensics or retrieval, things like that. So some policies will provide a sublimit for that, or allow you to get your own vendors approved prior to the policy and prior to a loss. So that's something to look for. A lot of them also have risk management capabilities. It's just funny. I mean, still today, even though we would think we would all be better about this, one of the leading causes of breach is your own employees clicking on, or you clicking on, something you shouldn't have. And so there are companies that offer risk management that you can deploy directly to your team, so that some of them will have phishing emails that go out that are fake phishing, and you can see who's clicking on them. So that's really nice. And that is really what's going to help you in these situations. It just takes one person to click on it. And then the other thing I would say is just making sure you're looking for warranties within a policy. So what that means is, one of the ones I looked at just the other day, it had it did have a sublimit for phishing, or where a bad actor sends an email, somebody within your organization thinks it's from the partner or whatever it might be, the shop manager, and they send out an invoice. They pay an invoice to who they think is a supplier, and it ended up being a bad actor. That's called social engineering, phishing. Those are typically going to have a sublimit. And even though we requested for a higher sublimit, there still was a warranty on there that the higher sublimit would only come into play if the manager signed off on the transfer. Well, if the manager's signing off on the transfer, they likely wouldn't, they probably wouldn't, you probably wouldn't transfer because that might ring a bell. So, you know, things like that I think are important to look at. There's also some warranties in terms of the security of your network. So we're talking about working from home. You know, you might have something in there that says, well, there's this coverage will only apply if you follow these very specific technical guidelines when it comes to cybersecurity, and which is good, right? They're trying to understand their exposure. But in this situation now, when we're all at home, are we still following those? Those are just good things to be aware of, not to say you should shy away from them, because that might, you know, if you follow those guidelines, it might save you money because you can get a policy that feels you're better protected. But you need to understand that those warranties are in place in the event that there is some sort of loss.
Right. Well, that's wonderful. So you walk people through the warranties as well when you're working with them? You walk the business owners through that?
Yes, absolutely. So we're always looking at the exclusions that are on the policy. I mean, unfortunately, it's hard to touch on every single clause of each policy, but it's important for us to have that conversation with our clients. And I also recommend, especially in talks and speaking with COVID, I recommend people looking at our website right now. We have an amazing risk control team that is staying on top of everything we can think of from a risk management side, and just compiling all the amazing resources that are out there right now. And we would just like to be able to help.
Yeah, I'll put all the links and information in the comments below. So below the video, so they know how to get in touch with you. And 100% they should go to cavanac.com and find the COVID resources. They're really tremendous.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good rest of your day.
You too.